tolerance, one of the things that the followers of critical social justice will do is they change the definitions of words to mean you think you're talking about the same thing, you're not talking about the same thing. So when you say tolerance, and I think you've given me a decent picture of what you're saying, but when you say tolerance, what does that mean?
So, you know, it's a good starting point, tolerance. One of the great rabbis of the Talmud said, what is hateful to you, don't do to others. So that would be a good starting point in the world we live today. And you're absolutely right. This is a battle, in many ways not yet engaged, over narrative, over language. But when you boil it down, it's also a battle over values. There are no shortcuts. You know, I was lucky enough, I spent in 1972 4 weeks in the Soviet Union. I came to understand quickly what was meant by you're in good hands with Allstate. I saw the price that everyday people were paying because they didn't have access to personal freedom. And I met many heroes, everyday people who said, I'm not going to take this. This is my life. I want to take responsibility. So I learned at a tender age how lucky I was to be born an American. And it's something that has always stuck with me. And here we are in the post-Cold War era, where we hear a lot of the same ideas now repackaged. And just having seen the abject failure of that experiment up close before, it is obviously, to me personally, very disconcerting.
Yeah, I think there's, I think it's failed something like 22 times. We don't need to try more, right?
But that also goes to the issue of collective memory. So one of the things, I think the most important contribution that the Jewish people has made to humanity is the concept of memory. There are a lot of cultures who say, who wants to focus on the bad stuff that happened in the past? There are a lot of philosophies and ideologies that say, no, you have to be able to purge the past so that you can live well now and move on. The Jewish people has always believed that you don't deflect the lessons from the past, you absorb them, you incorporate them, and that makes you stronger to move on. And certainly my interactions many times, for example, in Japan, on the issue of their failure to look squarely at what Imperial Japan did to its neighbors in the 30s and 40s. That's always an interesting topic to get involved with. But at the core, when you get to it, it's really a matter of our saying to my friends, and I consider them to be friends, now, there is something we can teach you, and that is if you want to be stronger going forward, however you describe that, economically, geopolitically, you can't erase the past. Look at the Jews and the Germans since World War II. Uneven, but they've been working at it. And if you say, well, let's just wait till everybody dies off in the Second World War, it'll be fine. And I said this to 40 members of the Diet. Take a look at Turkey and the Armenians. 100 years later, the hatreds are much deeper. They run deeper, the distrust is there, because there's been a failure to just deal with the facts of history. So memory is one of our key contributions, and the other one, which maybe is more positive, and that's the possibility of change. You can make a mistake, and you can change. That's what we're just going through here in terms of the Jewish High Holy Days. Every year, we look in the mirror. It's pretty ugly, and you have to sort of, come to grips with your own shortcomings. Even if you don't do it completely, it really does set the stage for you to have, you'll excuse the term, a more tolerant view of people you meet. Because unless you're expecting that everyone's going to be Mother Teresa in this world, you have to deal with flawed individuals, with people who don't necessarily see the world the same way as you do. And then do you have the tools to deal with that in order to forge meaningful relationships?
So you wrote a book with Reverend Johnny Moore about the plight of Christians, persecution. And recently, I attended this event where you were talking about deep, deep concerns with him and others about what would happen should the U.S. exit Iraq completely following the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Your specific concerns were around Yazidis and Christians in the area. So, and again, given everything you've told me right now, it makes a lot of sense why you would be involved with this. But tell me, what is going on here? What's the concern, and how does the Simon Wiesenthal Center and your work fit in?
The book that we wrote together, the Next Jihad, is about a silenced minority, actually not total minority in their own country, in this case Nigeria, where Christians are being killed by a variety of groups for many reasons, but first and foremost, I think, because of their faith. And they've been silenced. And I know from my own previous experience in another century, and there's no direct parallel, but nonetheless, when you had 3 million silenced Jews in the Soviet Union, they needed help for their concerns and cries and profound problems that they had. They needed help from the outside. And so after visiting with the Soviet Jews for a month, that became an important part of my life for quite a few years. I felt a sense of moral obligation to be, if you will, a bit of a megaphone for their voices, to make sure they were heard. Here we are in the 21st century, totally different circumstances, the largest and richest nation in Africa. And yet, I just kept reading these stories of Christians being killed in their churches, in their homes, driving Christmas Eve or during Easter between cities to visit families, and nothing. You would just read about the story, another CNN International story. Nothing was there. And so I actually, just kept pushing Johnny. He said, we got to go. And I'm not so sure he was too crazy about it. I'm sure our wives weren't, but just felt that we had to go because we had to, I'll use the term, first of all, witness what was going on, verify what was going on, and then we could maybe figure out how we could help. And that was just before COVID hit. And here we are in 2021, and that's a disaster that continues to unwind, a kind of slow motion genocide, which could be stopped. We haven't yet found the right levers in order to see it stop, but at least we can serve as, I don't think you use the term megaphone anymore, not in the age of social media, but we could be there to try to push and cajole and to try to create alliances to try to change the situation, in this case, for one religious minority. In Iraq, after what we just watched in Afghanistan, and we have a pretty good idea of Taliban too, what their plans are for that nation. It's way too big for any NGO or groups of NGOs to really make that much of a difference. But when you take a look at Syria with 900 US troops left in a particular area, in Iraq with a few thousand US soldiers, if the administration decides to remove those people, based on what happened already to the Yazidis and the Assyrian Christians, that would mean, I think, in very rapid succession, the end of those two people. They would essentially disappear. Their numbers, they're already 90% of Assyrian Christians were either killed or fled their historic homeland. It's one of the ancient Christian communities in history. Their history would effectively come to an end, and the Yazidis, their numbers are not very large to begin with. They could also be erased. So this is not so much to talk about the geopolitical situation or where we should be putting our troops and all the rest. We have 1.3 million troops in NATO. So this is not about numbers. it's really about the values of a nation